Controversial author Salman Rushdie, yes, I'm starting a video that way in 2022, once said of Persona 5, quote, "Persona 5 is a game whose driving force is the inadequacy of adults, even of good adults. A game that shows us how the weaknesses of grown-ups forces children to take control of their own destinies, and so, ironically, grow up themselves." Now, I have a confession to make, that was a lie. Salman Rushdie has never made a public statement about Persona 5. This quote is actually Rushdie describing the 1939 film The Wizard of Oz. When I first read this quote, though, I was struck by how well it also sums up Persona 5, a game in which corrupt or incompetent adults leave a world worse for their children, a story in which those children feel trapped by systems designed to keep them under control, a game in which these children break free of an unjust world in an effort to take control back. Persona 5 is a coming-of-age story about growing up and desperately rebelling against the established world order. It's incredibly punk, one need look no further than the game's character designs to see that. At the same time, though, Persona 5 is very The Wizard of Oz. The protagonist enters a fantastical dream world where they see distorted versions of people they know back home. It's only by confronting and defeating the more nefarious of these mirror-image characters, the wizard himself and the Wicked Witch of the West, that the protagonist can save the day and earn the right to return home. What else did Rushdie have to say about Persona 5? Quote, "The journey from Kansas to Oz is a rite of passage, from a world in which Dorothy's parent substitutes Auntie Em and Uncle Henry are powerless to save her dog Toto from the marauding Miss Gulch, into a world where the people are her own size and she is never ever treated as a child, but as a heroine. Miss Gulch could very easily stand shoulder to shoulder with any of the bosses in Persona 5, which I am being deliberately vague about to prevent spoilers. Hopefully, if you haven't played the game in its entirety yet, this video will help you to get a little more out of the experience, or encourage you to give it a try. I'm not worrying about spoiling The Wizard of Oz because, come on, it's an 80-year-old movie, the spoiler statute of limitations has passed on that one by now. But as I say, Miss Gulch has all the markings of a Persona 5 villain. She's a woman in a position of power afforded to her by wealth, and she uses that power to get what she wants, trampling over Dorothy and Toto in the process. When Toto stands up to her, he is given a punishment that does not fit his crime. All of the other grown-ups in Dorothy's life, in particular Auntie Em and Uncle Henry, do not like the situation, but they show no eagerness to upheave the status quo. It's up to Dorothy then to travel over the rainbow, defeat Miss Gulch's counterpart, and save Toto. Of course, the parallel isn't perfect. There's no explicit indication in The Wizard of Oz that Dorothy's actions in Oz have any bearing on the real world. As far as the film is concerned, it really was all a dream. This in and of itself is an odd departure from L Frank Baum's original novel, in which Dorothy's adventures in Oz really do happen, there's no ambiguity about it. There are a few other differences as well, but we'll get into those later. What though of Dorothy's travelling companions? How do they stack up against the Phantom Thieves? In the Wizard of Oz film, Dorothy's friends on her family farm, Hunk, Zeke and Hickory, all appear in Oz in new forms. Each has a great desire, a treasure that they seek, that they think will make them more fully formed, well-rounded people, or lions. The Scarecrow wants a brain, the Tin Woodman wants a heart, the Lion wants courage. You don't need me to tell you this. In Persona 5, many of the characters you meet in the real world have alternate selves in the metaverse, the game's equivalent to Oz. The twist here is that these characters' desires often take them too far, leaving their mirror images unhappy and causing pain to others around them. In a departure from The Wizard of Oz, it's only by helping these characters to see past their desires, let go of their unhealthy wants, that the protagonist can rescue them from their own negative emotions, and rescue those who are caught in their traps. Okay, so maybe this isn't a complete departure from The Wizard of Oz. One of the aforementioned big differences between the L Frank Baum book and the movie is the way in which the humbug of a wizard grants the wishes of Dorothy's companions. In the book, the wizard fills the Scarecrow's head with pins, inserts a pretend heart into the Woodman's chest, and gives the Lion a bottle of courage to drink. None of these are real solutions, but they make the heroes think they've been given what they want. In the film, the wizard takes a different approach. He convinces the Scarecrow that he really doesn't need a brain. What he needs is a diploma to prove that he's smart. The Woodman gets a testimonial, which he can show to others as proof of his kindness. The Cowardly Lion gets a medal, which is meant to convince other people that he's done some very brave deeds. These gifts are an interesting distinction from the gifts in the book. In the book, the wizard does something to the inside of the heroes to make them feel more brave, smart, or loving. Change comes from confidence within. In the film, it's all about how people see you. Appearances are all that matter to the wizard. It's not just enough to have courage, you need a medal to prove to others that you are brave. It's not about what's inside, it's about how you are seen. It's about your persona. This is the genius of Persona 5, of all the Persona games indeed, but I'm focusing on the most recent main series game for today. The idea of the false version of yourself that you show to others in conflict with the real you underneath, which you may not even be fully aware of yourself. None of the mirror image characters within Persona 5's metaverse are meant to be taken at face value. Neither are the lies told by their real-world counterparts. In The Wizard of Oz, Dorothy meets Professor Marvel, a well-meaning but deceitful charlatan who manipulates her naivety by pretending to have powers he doesn't actually have. She then travels into the film's equivalent of the metaverse and meets the Wizard of Oz, who similarly manipulates her naivety by pretending to have powers he doesn't actually have. Oz even does us the kindness of living in an enormous fantastical palace where everyone has to do his bidding without question. A palace with large impenetrable walls that the heroes have to negotiate their way into. When the heroes navigate through the palace, reaching the throne room of its ruler, Oz appears larger than life, big, loud, and invincible. It's only when Toto rips open the curtain that Oz's mask is finally torn from his face. His duplicity is revealed. The entire Persona 5 could very easily be summed up by that famous line, "Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain." It is the job of the Phantom Thieves to pull down curtains everywhere they go, exposing the lies of politicians, teachers, businessmen, the police, anyone in authority who uses that power incorrectly. This extends to the game's many confidants beyond the core cast of characters. We see adults who mean well but are ultimately ineffective, people who help the player but for a price, the occasional authority figure who, living a double life, is entirely subservient to their masters. It also, though, helps to repair some of the damage to society on a very personal level. Just as Dorothy's journey involves helping her friends as well as herself, the protagonist of Persona 5 helps to make the lives around them feel more whole, providing courage, brains, and heart to those that need them. Which now brings me to the crux of my argument here, because, sure, a lot of what I've just said might feel like circumstantial evidence for a deliberate link between Persona 5 and The Wizard of Oz. I'm not saying that the developers at Atlas deliberately set out to make The Wizard of Oz the game or anything like that, but I will argue that The Wizard of Oz is a direct inspiration for the game, or at least that some people involved in making the game were definitely thinking of Oz when they created their contributions. Again, not wanting to give spoilers here, but the game's most unusual dungeon, from a thematic standpoint, involves the Phantom Thieves specifically setting out to use their powers to aid someone in need. The music for this dungeon, Rivers in the Desert, is about healing from past trauma, and contains the line, "A heartbeat for a Tinman." Case closed, I'd say. Persona 5 is basically The Wizard of Oz. So if Persona 5 is Oz, then that makes Joker Dorothy. What does Mr. Rushdie have to say in his analysis of Dorothy? Quote, "Dorothy has a surname, Gale, and in many ways Dorothy is the gale blowing through this little corner of nowhere, demanding justice for her little dog while the adults give in meekly to the powerful Miss Gulch. Dorothy who is prepared to break the grey inevitability of her life by running away, and who, because she is so tender-hearted, runs back when Professor Marvel tells her Auntie Em is distraught that she has fled. Dorothy is the life force of Kansas, just as Miss Gulch is the force of death. And perhaps it is Dorothy's feelings, or the cyclone of feelings unleashed between Dorothy and Miss Gulch, that are made actual in the great dark snake of cloud that wriggles across the prairie eating the world. I've always felt that Dorothy Gale would be a good name for a pre-tragedy Batman villain with wind powers, but that's beside the point. Joker has access to all the same weapons as the corrupt adults in his miserable world. The adults hide their misdeeds, put on masks, assume false personas. There's that word again. Joker does all of this too, but, just like Batman, it's difficult to know which face is his real self and which is the mask. Joker's glasses, for example, worn only when he's attempting to blend in and live a normal life, appear to have a significant meaning. They are a mask of sorts. Just as his Phantom Thieves persona hides his identity in the metaverse, his glasses make him appear more bookish, unassuming, nerdy, and ultimately unthreatening in the real world. He doesn't appear to need them, he doesn't wear them before the start of the adventure, and he doesn't need to wear them when he's doing Phantom Thieves things. On the other hand, the Phantom Thieves mask is to Joker what the ruby slippers are to Dorothy. It is the source of his power, the means of his escape. It is only by removing his mask, by being open about his true identity, that his powers are unlocked. At the start of the game, Joker is tasked with living a normal life without drama until a set time at which point he can go home. Going home is all Dorothy cares about. The "there's no place like home" moral from the Wizard of Oz movie is not quite as forced in the book. It's added to the film to give some kind of easily digestible moral to the story. Much as I normally love finding a moral in any story, this one has never sat well with me because, well, Oz is so much more vibrant, interesting, and exciting than Kansas. It seems that Rushdie shares my appraisal, but has found a way to make the moral sit a little more comfortably. Quote, "The imagined world becomes the actual world, as it does for all of us, because the truth is that once we leave our childhood places and start to make our own lives, armed with only what we know and who we are, we come to understand that the real secret of the ruby slippers is not that there's no place like home, but rather that there no longer is any such place as home, except of course for the homes we make, or the homes that are made for us in Oz, which is anywhere and everywhere, except the place from which we began." End quote. I think of Persona 5 as being a sort of Oz for me, a fantasy world that I have visited, loved, created a strong connection to. See my video on the follow-up game Strikers to see just how real this game's world feels to me personally. taking this meta step out of the metaverse, planting myself as the protagonist of the story rather than Joker. I appreciate that I have the advantage to delve back into my personal Oz, the world of Persona 5 Shibuya, any time I want. Now I can even visit while on the bus, thanks to the game's newfound portability. One of the advantages that Persona 5 has over The Wizard of Oz is a runtime that's approximately 100 times as long. This, I'll admit, does great towards the end. I think that if anything this game is a little too long, and I maintain that the walking simulator Gone Home conveys basically the same message in a fraction of the words. That said, there's a benefit to lingering in Persona 5. Yes, you can skip the strolls around the hub world if you like, but I never do. Riding public transport, walking the streets, meeting friends naturally, and often quite accidentally. It's telling that my favourite moments from this game are not the bombastic action sequences, not the shouts of "you'll never see it coming," but the softer, quieter, gentler moments. The beneath the mask moments. The times when the game's characters show genuine, heartfelt emotion rather than over-the-top gravitas. The times when nothing of consequence is happening at all. The scenes that stand out most in my mind are very small. I remember studying for an exam while eating at a local cafe. I remember a lazy Saturday spent fishing with a friend. I remember walking around the dark city at night in the rain. The thing that made Persona 5 real, for me, is not its Oz-like metaverse, but its depiction of the mundane, boring, everyday life that Joker seeks to escape. Maybe that's because I'm an ineffective, inadequate grown-up myself now. Maybe it's because strolling through a big city is just the way that this particular introvert recharges. What matters is this: the game has left an indelible impression upon me. Returning to Persona 5 always feels like coming home. And when it comes to home, as we all know, well, I don't really need to say it, do I? Uh-oh, it's an ad, but don't worry, it's an ad for something nice. Education. Brilliant is a learning platform that teaches STEM skills through interactive lessons. Over the past few years I've tried my hand repeatedly at making computer games in my spare time, and I have always wanted to learn more about coding and computer logic. I've undertaken a computer science fundamentals course on Brilliant, and I've got to say I love how clearly everything is laid out. I love that it visualizes what is being discussed so that my brain can make sense of it. I love that there are chihuahuas and funny cartoon faces in the lessons, and I love most of all that I learned by doing with neat interactive exercises. One of the great things about Brilliant is that it's accessible to those of all skill levels, so a relatively inexperienced computer user like myself can get something out of it, or if you're more interested in learning astrophysics or calculus, they've got you covered as well with more advanced courses. Because of the way the courses are designed around creative problem solving, and crucially because everything is visual and interactive, it's nice and easy to soak up practical skills on even quite advanced topics. Brilliant's courses cover mathematics, science, and computer science. It's free to start learning, but if you want to sign up for premium access, the first 200 users to use our custom link will get 20% off an annual subscription for a premium plan. Head to brilliant.org/videogamestorytime to try it out for yourself, and thank you very much for watching.